On today's Live Open Daily, Meta is trying to expand outside of gaming, but will this be a success like the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, or will it fail like the Quest Pro? I'm your host, Live Open Mike, and before we get into the meat potatoes of this episode, I do need to address something: the music. When I first started this podcast 3 weeks ago, several people immediately said, hey, you might want to consider putting some music behind it. These might have been people who saw my old YouTube stuff where I always had music under my voice and were just used to that. So I said, okay, I'm going to do 2 weeks without music, which I did for the first 2 weeks, and then I'll do 2 weeks with music, which we're in the middle of now, and I'll put up a poll and let everyone decide. As of this episode, we'll pretty much be at 50-50, so if you go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/liveopenmic, in case you're listening to this pod elsewhere, there will be a poll up to let all of you vote on whether or not we leave music under my voice throughout the podcast, maybe use it sporadically, or just no music at all. So whether you fall on team no music or team music, let your voice be heard. I'll leave that poll up for the rest of the week, and then starting next week in week 5, we'll kind of roll with whatever format and whatever you guys decide. I hate the sound of my own voice, so I'm a terrible judge for this, so I'm going to let you all decide the direction of the pod moving forward. We'll also vote on some other stuff down the line. With that said, let's get into the news. There are 2 stories to highlight today, but they're kind of in the same realm. Meta has made no secrets of the fact that they kind of don't really want to be a gaming company. They've always wanted to expand beyond that. In a perfect world for Meta, number 1, they have all your data, and 2, people are walking around wearing a Quest all day long. They're not just using it for gaming, they're using it for other purposes, for movie watching, things like that, in a similar way to what Apple Vision Pro was presented as. Unfortunately, even though we've made a lot of strides in like the comfort of it, minus the default strap, we don't need to talk about that. But in general, with the Quest Pro and the Quest 3, they made a lot of strides in like a smaller form factor due to the pancake lenses. They've experimented with the open peripheral for Quest Pro versus still using the facial interface on Quest 3. But in general, I think everyone can agree that both of those headsets are more comfortable than the Quest 2 because the Quest 2 was so bulky. The problem now is software, and Meta is taking steps to address that. Even though the bulk of the apps currently available on the the Meta Horizon store are games, there are apps for other purposes. There's mindfulness apps like a Tai Chi app. There's several yoga apps there. There's apps that help you learn new languages. There's actually a couple. Some of them are gamified, some of them are not. There are apps for travel, like the National Geographic app is one I've used for some of my older relatives when I put them in a headset, and a bunch of other use cases I could keep going on and on about. Now Meta is taking it a step further, and they're going to actively fund some of the development of these apps moving forward for smaller companies. I'm reading directly from Meta's blog here. The headline is Introducing the Meta Quest Lifestyle App Accelerator. Nearly every week, creative developers launch Meta Quest apps in new categories that show the world how mixed reality can go beyond gaming and give people new reasons to put on their Meta Quest headsets. As part of the Meta Quest 3 launch, Zach Reed demonstrated how mixed reality on Meta Quest can help people learn to play instruments with his app Piano Vision, which was followed by new apps like Paradiddle by, I'm going to mess this name up, Amir Tinirgan. I butchered that, I'm so sorry. Targeting other instruments. Developers are also experimenting with new ways to empower people to cook, read, shop, and make chores fun on Meta Quest. While these are just a few examples of the early successes in this space, there are still many more lifestyle categories to explore, such as fashion, beauty, design, DIY, arts and crafts, and more, that make use of our latest innovations in MR, hand tracking, and AI. To push the future of novel mixed reality-based lifestyle apps forward, we're excited to announce our new Meta Quest Lifestyle App Accelerator, where Meta will provide grant funding and mentorship to developers in partnership with venture partners who are committed to nurturing the ecosystem of Meta Quest founders. There's a bunch of companies listed here that I'm not going to read off. The Meta Quest Lifestyle App Accelerator is designed to spur the development of prototype consumer experiences that help people explore their interests and communities around them, pursue their passions, build new skills, and enhance their favorite activities. Whether you are new to mixed reality development or are part of a seasoned development team, we want to see how your ideas can enrich people's lives and help kickstart your company to do so. With Meta Quest 3 and Presence platform, which includes cutting-edge innovations in MR, hand tracking, and AI, we believe several categories in lifestyle are ripe for innovation. Below are some examples we encourage you to check out and consider, but are no means exhaustive. In fact, we are excited to see what new categories of innovation and consumer experiences you create to delight audiences and help people do more with Meta Quest. Fashion. What is the future of fashion on Meta Quest? Virtual fitting rooms with AI-assisted personalized styling? Even the closets that extend your wardrobe with possible purchases? Is it something else entirely? Design. How can we redefine the boundaries of traditional design? By placing objects in the context of your space with virtual prototyping, spatial visualization, or an entirely new method of design? Cooking. Can the kitchen of the future become a playground for culinary creativity? Will interactive learning or cultural exchanges drive how we prepare food? How else can we define our kitchens? DIY. How can we make home decoration, curation, projects, renovations, and repairs more accessible and easier to perform? Now that learning a new instrument is easier than ever before, how will jamming be redefined and musical creativity unleashed? What role will music play in the metaverse? Ugh. I still cringe when I read that word. Arts and crafts. How can artistic creations transcend the confines of traditional mediums with virtual creations or real creations with virtual guidance some other way? Some other categories to think about where real-world activities are enhanced with capabilities we never had before include dating, beauty, shopping, and more. Select participants will receive grant funding across 3 paid milestones during the 6-month program to prototype their concepts with small teams. In addition to grant funding, teams will receive mentorship and coaching from Meta, peer learning opportunities, and VC mentorship. VC stands for venture capital for those who don't know, basically funding from very large companies. Teams in countries where MetaQuest is supported are also eligible to receive up to 3 MetaQuest 3 dev kits. All dev teams will also keep full ownership of their IP, code, assets, design, and distribution rights. The submission process for this opened last week on June 18th. The submissions closed in October. Teams will be selected for the process at the end of this year, actually on New Year's Eve, and then from December to May, you'll be in the middle of project development. I'm going to skip some of the criteria they give out and like tips and tricks for putting together a pitch deck because that's not really germane to this conversation. Let's get to what we're looking for. We're looking for founders who want to build companies dedicated to mixed reality apps and lifestyle categories that drive engagement with MetaQuest users. Whether your company has a long track record of publishing apps or is just getting off the ground, our MetaQuest Lifestyle App Accelerator could be a great fit if you're working on a brand new MetaQuest Lifestyle app that is big enough to be a standalone business. What we're not looking for. If your company is Series B or later, I'll explain what Series B is in just a second, this is not the right program for you. We're also not considering applications for market activations, B2B apps targeting schools or professionals. B2B stands for business to business. There's also B2C, which is business to consumer. That's what they're looking for here. Video games, media consumption, fitness and wellness, or sports at this time. And then there's the terms and conditions, all the fine print about what they're looking for in these teams, so on and so forth. So while reading that, one of the lines was if your company is Series B or higher, when you're looking for funding and investors for your company, that breaks up into rounds. The first round is generally called Series A. That's pretty much what you're trying to do to get your development off the ground, to actually make your first app or your first product if you're making hardware, something like that. Series B is when you're starting to scale. That's when you already have a product or you're very close to having a product to bring to market and you're ready to hire more employees, basically to scale up, to put the infrastructure in place to be able to grow the company successfully instead of just growing haphazardly and just having a bunch of guys working out of their garage. That's what Series B is. Meta's not looking for Series B companies because if you're in Series B, you're already deep into the development cycle. You might already have a product out on the market and you're already looking to get more money in to go bigger and bigger, which means that like solo developers, like really small teams, maybe a bunch of friends who got together and kind of want to make a project together, but don't really have the venture capital to like say leave their jobs for a year. This is going to be for people like that who are trying to get their foot in the door and get their company off the ground, not necessarily for a company that's already established. So this isn't anything really new. Meta has done something called a hackathon for several years now, dating back to, as far as I can see, 2020, before they rebranded to Meta from Facebook. If you don't know what a hackathon is, it's basically a social coding event where Meta will get together a bunch of small teams, usually like 3 to 5 or so, something like that, and they'll all compete head-to-head in coding challenges in different categories. Meta just had a hackathon in New York just I think it's like 2 months ago, and my company 3 Pound Games was lucky enough to participate in that, and we actually won our category. But essentially they'll give you like a challenge to say, okay, make an app that does this, and they tell you to do it using their Presence platform, which is their group of SDKs about mixed reality, artificial intelligence, so on and so forth, like I just read from that blog. And you have a condensed amount of time, not like months or years like they're doing for this program, but just a few days, maybe even a few hours to put together a prototype for something. It doesn't have to be a finished product, but at least like come up with the concept of something and then present it to a group of judges who determine basically best in show. Here's a quick description of that. Build a new mixed reality experience using Meta's Presence platform capabilities, including at least one mixed reality capability, i.e. pass-through, spatial anchors, scene, mesh, depth, and at least one additional Presence platform SDK, that's software development kit for those who don't know, including but not limited to Interaction SDK, Movement SDK, Voice SDK, or Audio SDK. The experience should align with one of the following categories: casual and social gaming, a lightweight or multiplayer gaming experience, Hobbies, interests, and skill building, new applications that help enhance your hobbies in mixed reality, like learning a new instrument, for instance piano vision, or utility and design experiences, using mixed reality to solve problems in the world around you or decorate or design your space. The company I work for, 3 Pound Games, won in the utility category with an app called Home Care Helper. I've tried to describe this app multiple times and I stumbled through it on this podcast trying to record it, so I'm just going to read what they wrote because they wrote it much better. Home Care Helper harnesses the power of spatial computing to offer a groundbreaking solution for getting the best help by creating contextualized instructions tied to your home. There's so much to manage at home, but with our busy lives and so much travel, many responsibilities end up shifted to service providers such as pet sitters, cleaners, movers, home care aides, repair technicians, and house sitters. Instead of helping your providers get the job right, let's give them better contextualized instructions and stop worrying if Fluffy gets the right treats or if your Monstera is overwatered. Users will set anchor points as points of interest for service providers with notes telling them what they need to do. They can also create a task list to go through, which can be linked to created points. The service provider can then use this information for training in space and also while working for reminders. So again, Meta's been doing stuff like this. I saw a Facebook hackathon dating back to 2020 when I was doing research for this podcast, and this app accelerator seems to be the next step of that. Now, does this have implications for gaming? Yes and no. Number one, if Meta is bringing in more money and more users into the Quest ecosystem, they're just going to double down and invest more money into it, which we're all going to win at that point. While you as a gamer, and I'm in the same boat, may not really care about this, think about the other people in your life. Think about your friends and family who are not gamers that you would like to try VR. I've actually done demos with people who are not gamers and actually hate the sense of a controller, so I'll pick a nice hand tracking app that's really lightweight and easy to use, or I'll use something like the National Geographic app or something that shows them like amazing landscapes all over the world, especially for my older relatives. I'm 43, so my aunts and uncles and my mom are all in their 60s. They're not really traveling all that much anymore, so this is something to help them kind of see parts of the world they're never going to be able to travel to. A lot of people already use like melee combat games or rhythm games like Synth Riders and Beat Saber to exercise, and there are also a ton of exercise apps out there. Apps like Supernatural, which Meta already owns, or apps like XR Workout, which is an app that my company actually worked on. Ultimately, the goal of this is to get more people in headsets. Meta is really going for quantity here, not necessarily for quality. And while that sounds a little disingenuous, the point is to grow this ecosystem to have millions of people wearing Quest headsets every single day. If it's limited to just gaming, there's only so far it can go. There's a lower ceiling for that. Meta already tried to break into this with productivity with the Quest Pro. There's a bunch of reasons that Quest Pro failed. I might actually do a whole podcast dedicated to that. But the difference here is they're going for software, not hardware, and I think that was one of the mistakes they made with Quest Pro. They put out a piece of hardware without the software to support it. Imagine the Quest Pro at launch with like full Microsoft Office integration. We have Microsoft Office now, but it's just the web apps, it's not even like the full programs. Imagine if it launched with like Adobe support, the full Google App Store, like all these things that you would need to get as many apps as possible into your headset to do whatever you need to do. You have photo editing software, video editing software, and you're not tethered to your computer specifically to do it. Maybe there's some kind of cloud solution. The Pro might have done better. I'm not sure who said this first, but I firmly believe in this. Software sells hardware. You can have the best tech in the world, but it doesn't matter if you don't have the software to back it up. So if Meta's trying to build up their app library of uses outside of gaming first and then try to use that to sell Quest headsets, I think that's going to be a smart move. And they're going to pour more money into all aspects of the business, not just lifestyle, but that'll filter down to gaming. So me personally, I'm crossing my fingers this works, even though I'm not likely to use most of these apps. Maybe something for cooking, because I would like to have a recipe next to me as I'm actually cooking something. But for the most part, this is something I'm not really personally interested in, but I am kind of invested in the success of it. Our other story is about the Meta Ray-Bans. I hope Meta gave Lee Chen Miller a raise. If you don't know who Lee Chen Miller is, go back and watch Meta Connect last year, day one, about midway through or so. She was the person who, after they rolled out the Quest 3 and talked about all the exciting things they were going to do with it, she came out and talked about the Meta Ray-Bans. I almost turned off my live stream because I was streaming this live when it happened. We left it going because people in chat were interested in seeing the presentation. Her energy was fantastic, and she alone probably sold thousands of those sunglasses. I'm going to sound like a show, but really, go back and watch it. She was that good. I'm quoting straight from an article on Road to VR from Scott Hayden. Reality Labs, Meta's XR division formed in 2020, is now being reorganized into two distinct groups, wearables and metaverse, which reportedly comes with a relatively small number of layoffs. As reported by The Verge's Alex Heath, Meta CTO and head of Reality Labs Andrew Bosworth announced the reorganization in an internal memo to employees, stating that all teams in Reality Labs are being merged into either a central metaverse organization responsible for Quest and a new wearables organization dedicated to other hardware, including its Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses. In the memo, Bosworth says the company's smart glasses were a much bigger success than we expected, spurring the XR division to put more focus on the product. We have the leading AI device on the market right now, and we are doubling down on finding a strong product market fit for wearable Meta AI, building the business around it, and expanding the audience. Our North Star to overlay digital content seamlessly onto the physical world remains the same, but the steps on that path just got a lot more exciting. Notably, Meta smart glasses don't include displays of any type, AR or otherwise, instead offering input through voice assistant and touch on the glasses struts for things like taking pictures, videos, and listening to music. In late 2023, Meta also added AI-powered object recognition. As for its Quest-related efforts, Bosworth said the company is still deeply committed to investing in Horizon as a core foundation of our social spatial Horizon OS and high-quality experiences for both mixed reality and mobile. And to end on a down note here, a quote from Andrew Bosworth: "The org chart doesn't primarily determine whether we succeed or fail, our execution does. But by setting it up this way, I hope we reduce overhead and allow people across teams to come together and execute with a more unified view of who our customers are and how we can best serve them." This reorganization is going to come with a small number of layoffs. We don't know how many yet. We'll probably find out in the next week or two, but there will be some people laid off, as I'm going to guess positions become redundant as they break up into two different teams. I think this is a case of striking while the iron's hot. If you think of this in terms of gaming terms, look at the success of something like Gorilla Tag, a game that's made over $100 million. We're going to do a podcast on that one probably later on this week. And the number of clones that have spawned. Gorilla Tag has gotten so many clones submitted to SideQuest that the SideQuest founders actually flat out said, "We're not taking any more Gorilla Tag offerings, don't submit anymore, we're just not accepting them." There are a lot of games who have tried to ape the success of games like Beat Saber and a lot of other rhythm games. Social apps like VRChat and Rec Room spawn all kinds of copycats, and basically when someone sees a success, they need to jump on it. And unlike the Quest Pro, people are actually buying the Meta Ray-Bans. I read a report that they have actually sold out of multiple SKUs and you can't order them on their website. I don't have a pair yet, so I haven't looked into trying to get one for myself, but they've been trying to keep up with production and scaling that up because they didn't expect them to be that popular. Generally, when demand outweighs supply, this is a good problem to have because it means that people actually want to buy your product. To sum it all up, the Meta Ray-Bans are already a success, so it just makes sense to double down on that. And for the App Accelerator, I'm excited to see what comes out in a year or two. We don't know, just like we didn't know we were going to fall in love with VR when we all first tried our first headset, we have no idea what apps are going to come out of this that we actually may fall in love with and say, you know what, this is something I need in my everyday life. People said the same thing about stuff like Siri and Google Assistant when those first hit the market, and now that's on almost every smart device you can think of. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of this in the next year or two and what kind of innovation that these developers can do. I am always going to be in favor of letting creative people be creative. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for checking it out. You can get Live Open Daily and my other podcast, the XR Remix Podcast, on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and iHeart. Make sure to vote in the poll and maybe up by the time you read this about whether or not I'm going to leave music in the podcast or not. Let your voice be heard for that, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.